There's a version of you that shows up in certain rooms and certain conversations, clear, direct, fully present, where what you say and what you actually think are the same thing. And there's another version of you that stakes feel higher, or the relationship feels more fragile, or the moment doesn't feel like the right one. That version edits and adjusts. It says the right thing instead of the true thing. Most leaders know both versions. The question this episode is, which one is running more of your life than you'd like to admit? If we haven't met, I'm Kris Quintana. I work one-on-one with business owners and executives on high-performance leadership around clarity, energy, courage, and influence. Today, I'm thinking out loud about what it actually takes to live in alignment with your values and why that's one of the quieter, harder forms of courage in leadership. I want to start with something that might reframe how you think about authenticity, because I think this word itself has become a little slippery. It's been a little co-opted. When most people these days hear be authentic, they hear permission to be unfiltered, to say whatever they think, to stop performing. I actually like that one. To not care about how their actions impact others. That's not what I mean, though. Authentic leadership, to me, isn't about removing your filter. It's more about whether the decisions you're making, the standards you're holding, and the things you're saying in high stakes moments are actually coming from you, from what you value, or if they're coming from a version of you that's been slowly shaped by what each situation seemed to require. And those are very different things. And for high capacity leaders, the distance between these two things can open up so gradually that it's almost invisible until it isn't. It doesn't start with a dramatic compromise. It starts with something reasonable, a situation where the timing isn't right to say the true thing, a standard you relax once because the circumstance genuinely called for flexibility, a decision you make based on what's practical rather than what's actually right for you. Each one has a rational case. Each one is survivable on its own. Each one feels like leadership in the moment. And then, somewhere along the way, you notice that you've ended up somewhere you didn't consciously choose to be. Not in one step, in 100 little steps. None of those decisions, no single decision was the problem. The direction they added up to was the issue. I had a client who runs his own business, homeschools his kids with his wife, and knows without a doubt that his family and faith are his highest priorities. In fact, it's a cornerstone of almost every decision he makes. So imagine his frustration when he realized he was working all the time instead of making time for his wife and kids. When he and I talked about it, he couldn't remember a single moment when things shifted. It was just staying a little later here and there, getting to work a little earlier for this one thing, less and less time to spend on homework, fewer date nights, until one day he recognized that he was not living the kind of life he wanted to model for his kids. It wasn't a conscious choice to change his priorities. It just crept up over time. How do you recognize you're living out of alignment before it goes too far? The signals are easy to miss if you're not looking for them. It might look like one of these. You leave conversations having said the right thing and feeling vaguely like you didn't say the true thing. What you offered was accurate, what you withheld was honest. And some part of you registers the difference, even when nobody else does. You keep agreeing to things you told yourself you were done agreeing to. You didn't change your mind, but the moment came and holding the line felt harder than letting it go. Again. Maybe your standards have shifted quietly, not all at once, adjusted slightly, and then slightly again. If someone asked you what your standards were, you'd still name the original ones. But maybe your recent actions and recent decisions tell a slightly different story. There are all forms of self-silencing, and self-silencing sustained over time is what living out of alignment actually looks like in a high-performing leader. It's not a dramatic departure from your values. It's just a quiet habit of overriding your own signal before it can fully land. Now, here's where the courage piece comes in. Living authentically as a leader requires a specific kind of courage that maybe doesn't get talked about so much because it's internal. Nobody sees it. It doesn't make a good story, but it's often harder than the external courageous moves people do talk about. And that's the courage to feel that internal tightening, that quiet signal that something doesn't fit, and not immediately explain it away. Because your ability to construct a rational case for almost any decision is one of your strengths. And in this context, it's the thing that works against you. We're talking about the courage to say what you actually think, even when there's a real cost to saying it. Instead of performing honesty or offering the version that you think will land well, you actually put your unedited read on the table. This is the same courage that helps you hold a standard when relaxing it would be easier and nobody would blame you for it. When the external pressure is real and the internal case for holding feels abstract compared to the practical case, it's also the courage to slow a decision down long enough to check it against what matters to you, not just against what's expedient. And here's the one I think catches leaders most off guard. The courageous move most people imagine is the hard conversation you need to have with someone else, the honest feedback, the boundary that needs to be set, the thing they've been avoiding saying out loud. Those are real. They matter. I mean, that was the topic of my last video. These things we do require courage. But the harder conversation is often the one you have with yourself about what you've been tolerating, about what you've been calling reasonable that you actually know doesn't fit who you are, about the gap between the values you'd name if asked and what your recent decisions actually reflect. That conversation requires a specific kind of self-trust, the willingness to look at what's actually there rather than the version that's easier to live with. Here's an example. It may sound small, but this is the kind of thing that adds up. And sometimes these easier examples, these simpler examples, make more sense, right? So I made an agreement with myself to move for 10 minutes every hour and to take at least a 30-minute walk during the day. I also have a problem with time blindness. So when I'm working on something that's interesting or challenging or fun, I lose all track of time. So I won't get up for 2 or 3 hours. My lunch break gets thrown off, I end up missing the walk, and the result is my body feels stiff and sore, and I have less energy. Seems like an easy enough thing to fix, right? Part of me thinks, oh, maybe it's just not that important to me. But the truth is, it does matter. And it bothers me when I break that agreement with myself because I know it's not aligned with how I see myself or with what I tell my clients. And yet, in the moment, I justify it with the fact that the work needs to be done. It isn't until I'm reviewing my day I realize I missed again. Now, when I set a timer and I have to stop what I'm doing to turn it off and I see the note move on the timer, then I create enough space to think first and to run my choice through the filter of what matters to me, what actually matters. On those days, I'm not on autopilot. My values become an operating filter rather than an after-the-fact reference point. Here's another example. This one's a little tougher. I worked with a business owner who took on a new client. It was an important opportunity, good money, long-term project. They liked the new client pretty well. They were really excited to start working together. And on the first day, that client made a racist comment about someone else. My client didn't say anything, but felt really uncomfortable. The second week, their new client made another pretty awful, possibly worse, racist comment. My client didn't know what to do. On the one hand, they really wanted the work. They also didn't think anything they said would change this person's point of view. On the other hand, it made them so uncomfortable because it goes against their underlying values. It was a littleish thing in the moment, but this is the kind of silence that adds up over time. I want to offer a reframe here because I think this is where the real shift happens for most leaders. Authentic leadership isn't a character trait you either have or don't have. It's a practice. Specifically, it's the practice of continuing to check your decisions, your standards, and what you're willing to say or do against what you actually value, and being willing to act from that even when it's inconvenient. And when leaders do that consistently, something interesting happens. Decisions get faster because you're checking against something that doesn't shift based on what the room needs from you today. So when your values are the actual filter rather than a reference you consult afterward, the decision process simplifies. Your presence will get more consistent also. There's less internal management happening. When less energy goes towards monitoring the gap between how you're operating and how you want to operate, then all that energy comes back. And the people around you will feel it, even when they can't name what's different. There's something about a leader who is operating from the inside out that people orient to differently. It reads as trustworthiness and as a kind of stability that isn't being performed. Here's what I want to leave you with this week. Think about a value you hold clearly, something you'd name without hesitation if someone asked what mattered to you as a leader. Now, look at your last 30 days of decisions, not the easy ones, the ones that had some pressure attached, the ones where something was at stake. How often did that value actually function in the moment as a filter? How often did it shape what you said, what you agreed to, and what standard you held? If there's a gap, and for many leaders there is, it's not a character flaw. Each of those decisions probably made sense on its own. The question is what direction they added up to, and whether that direction is one you'd choose if you were choosing consciously. That's the honest internal conversation. And it requires the courage to have it before you can do anything about it. That's what authentic leadership actually requires. It's not about being unfiltered or performing the internet's version of what authenticity is. It's just ongoing willingness